Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. I probably look like a can of smash you know what, because I've made this video 3 times. I even sent the video to somebody who I trust, and they gave me some feedback on the video, and they said, you know, people are gonna be mad. Outrage culture, right? The snowflakes are gonna have their feathers ruffled regardless of how you phrase it. But I decided to give it another go, and I got some notes this time because I like to be thorough. And every time I redo a video, I always get more ideas, so there's more layers to add to the conversation. Before I start, I gotta pitch my store, man, because we got so much cool survival gear in the store right now. I'm getting connected with so many different amazing companies who are making innovative strides in their various domains. So we have a lot of really cool cutting-edge survival gear technology, not just survival gear, just everyday camping gear, some preparedness products, tactical stuff. So go check out CanadianPreparedness.com, and I am going to start price matching. So if you see prices, as long as it's not eBay, because eBay, you never know what the hell you're getting. You're getting knockoffs and all the rest. This video is for the YouTube generals. It's been a long time since we've had drama in this community. If anybody remembers the Miami Prepper saga, then you are a YouTube prepping veteran, because that was damn near 5 years ago now. That was in the days of, I'm not even going to start listing people off, but we need some drama. So I'm calling out the YouTube generals. And what do I mean by that? Basically, I'm talking about enlisted personnel who are masquerading as experts when it comes to society building. But let me explain something first right from the get-go. I have the utmost respect for people who have fought on the front lines of battle, whatever that means nowadays, front lines, because it takes balls. It's a great experience to have, regardless of the ethics of whether or not your country should have been in a certain place or not. Just the fact that you have that experience, I respect the experience you have. And by some people's accounts, the service that you've done for your country. Now, what I want to say is that security is one of the most vital layers of the survival pyramid. It's second, but I think in a without rule of law situation, it's very arguable that it should be the base, it should be the foundation. If you do not have the ability to protect yourself and defend yourself, your group is probably not going to make it that long. So I would say that it's very necessary to have the skills required to defend yourself in a without rule of law scenario. There's a difference between the words necessary and sufficient. It's one of the first things you learn in Logic 100, is that something that is necessary is just one of many other things that are necessary for a conclusion to follow, to be sufficient, for a society to be to have everything it needs. It needs a bunch of necessary things. Security is but one of those things. What happens is that many people get into this prepping thing, survival thing, from the perspective of somebody who has been in the military. So everything they see is colored by that, regardless of whether they want to think so or not. Their militarism underlies how they view how a society should be reconstructed. And what I'm going to argue today is that although it plays a necessary role, it is not in itself sufficient for reconstructing a thriving society. There are many skills which are transferable from a modern combat training perspective to without rule of law, but it's not as much so as people think. Give me a couple Viet Cong, you know, who are trained to fight asymmetrically and guerrilla warfare, over somebody who's been regimented into the rank and file protocol following system of modern militaries. I mean, I'm sure there's freedom of thought on some level in some levels of the mission, but by and large, it's you follow the protocol, right? So you're not really, there's not a lot of individuality within the military. You're not really thinking for yourself unless you're in the higher levels, unless you have people underneath you. Then you have a bit of autonomy in that regard. But by and large, without rule of law, is asymmetrical, it's anarchy. Okay, so just because you have training in an us versus them, even if you've had, you know, combat, real life combat experience in a situation which was, you know, there's one team versus another team, which I know it's not always that cut and dry, especially in modern warfare. There's various different groups, you know, so it's not just, you know, us versus the bad guys. It's, you know, these Kurds and the Iraqis and the, you know, whatever, right? So it's not that cut and dry. So there is an element of it that is kind of a melting pot of chaos, but not near the melting pot of chaos that without rule of law would be, which would just be a bunch of, you know, different groups, you know, trying to survive. So what I'm trying to say there is that there are going to be aspects of your military training which are going to be transferable to a without rule of law situation, but it's not going to be a one-to-one transfer of skills, if that makes sense. So I'm going as far to say that it's necessary to have some people within your group trained to have military experience. You could probably argue that it wasn't necessary, that it was a very good asset, that under the right conditions and that in the right environment, if you had the right setup, if you had the right fortress or whatever, that a group of people who didn't have a lot of experience could still defend themselves. If they, you know, I mean, you're going to have people who accelerate through military training and really pick up skills right away, and you're going to have other people who just don't. There's a difference, you know, just because you've went and seen combat doesn't mean you were, you know, necessarily really good at it. And I'm not taking away from, you know, I'm not saying anybody on YouTube in particular is not good, wasn't good in their role, but you know, people can learn skills. There are people who are quick learners who can learn on the fly, although absolutely having the experience of the stress of combat and all of those things and getting the motor skills hardwired is very important. So I'm not taking away from that. There's a difference also between enlisted personnel and officers on YouTube. You seldom see officers, you know, from lieutenant and up on YouTube. And if you do, well, I mean, I don't think I've had any self-declare as that, as an officer, and perhaps that's for a variety of reasons. One, I would presume maybe they're a bit more tight-lipped on that level, and they're bound to more confidentiality. I'm sure a lot of them are probably lifers, you know, like once you're in that level, you're on track to stay in the military for a long time. And who knows, maybe there's a variety of other reasons also, but it would seem as though, and maybe this is going to be my most offensive comment of all, maybe some military people on here would agree with me, that there's a lot of people who perhaps were lower ranking in the military masquerading as if they're officers when it comes to talking about, you know, grid down social organization and how they're gonna, you know, how they're gonna manage the battlefield, so to speak, when maybe at best they led a squad or a platoon or something like that, which is sizable, don't get me wrong. I mean, you can do a lot of damage, especially in an anarchy situation with, you know, 6 to 20, 40 guys. You know, you could do a lot, but that's not the same as building a society. I'm going to get into why there's such a huge difference. There's a reason why people come on here and do what I'm doing. It's because we all want to be pedagogues. We want to teach. There's a desire to educate and to share our understandings and our knowledge and our experience. So I can see why people want to come on and do that and share their experiences. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, security is critical. It's necessary. It's not sufficient. I have to keep emphasizing that point. But what happens when you get somebody who is strictly cut from that cloth? If they go all the way with that, in shit hits the fan and they're the top dog in their community, what you're probably going to get, not always, but what you are very likely going to get if you let a bunch of military guys run your community, is you're going to get a military dictatorship. It's inevitable. Because when you think that something that is necessary is sufficient in understanding the world, which a lot of people seem to do. A lot of people seem to think that it's the number one thing and everything else is back burner. And it is the number one thing in the early phases. But after that, the military men need to step aside. That you have to step aside. I'm going to talk about why. You have some military men, however, who are rare exceptions. And there's one YouTuber in particular who, although I don't agree with about everything, has very cogent arguments when it comes to his view of society, and that's Hibernian's son. He can, at the same time emphasizing the importance of being very fierce in combat, and I think he has a video about how it's important to bring terror to the enemy. So he keeps it real in that regard, but at the same time, he has very well-reasoned philosophies and sociological arguments, even though we may not share the same religious beliefs. He's probably one of the more well-rounded people in terms of intellectual capabilities who's talking about shit hits the fan from a military man perspective. So go check out Hibernian's son. He occasionally will make videos for YouTube, but he's mostly on Patreon. One of the few people I subscribe to on Patreon. I just got to reset the camera here one sec. So yeah, like I was saying, Hibernian's son has that cold-blooded rationalist type thinking, like an Ayn Rand style thinking. I'm not sure if that's a philosophy he espouses, but that's who he reminds me of. So if you're talking about societal reconstruction, it doesn't always have to be from a militaristic perspective. There's hard skills and there's soft skills. Both are required to build a refined, powerful society. I did a video a long time ago about the nerds and the jocks and the hippies, and how if you have a society full of jocks, it's not going to be a good balance. You need the hippies and the nerds and the diplomats. If you don't have all those people in the right proportions, you're not going to have a strong society. I give a variety of different reasons why you need nerds in your society. You need hippies in your society. It's a balance of power, a fine balance of power which compels society forward. Another thing to consider is that how many politicians have done, especially nowadays, particularly the one in office. I think Trump was in a military school when he was younger, but he was never in the military. He never, was on the front lines of battle. How many CEOs of companies, how many business owners or mayors or senators have actually had real-life combat experience? But they're the ones who are running the country, supposedly. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to run a large organization, which is exactly what a post-collapse community would essentially be, even though you're not operating within a lawful environment, it's without rule of law. In order to have the ability to manage those kind of human resources, it's an entirely different skill altogether than leading a squad of guys into battle. Entirely different. So don't think that just because you have some experience with that, and you can brandish a gun on camera, that somehow you know more than a person who's never had that experience with regards to reconstructing society out of the ashes. It's important also to understand the spectrum of understanding from the lower ranking enlisted personnel to the high ranking officers. A private, like the lowest rank in the military, I think is private. The reason why they call it private is because everything you know about what's going on is just your own. Everything rolls downhill to you. Okay? You have absolutely no control over everybody else except yourself. Your knowledge of the battlefield is private. It's your own. You only see what's right in front of you. Take that out to the level of general. The general has a broad understanding of the battlefield. To me, if I was to put my faith in someone's capability to run a society, it's going to be the guy who controls 40,000 troops as opposed to the guy who controls 6. Now, I'm not saying that, I mean, there's probably amazing sergeants who, you know, there's generals who could never do what, you know, sergeants do. So it's a different skill set, right? But what I'm saying is the purview of a general is more conducive to managing many human resources in a society. Now, some people are probably thinking to themselves right now, well, you know, I'm of this free man of the land belief, and I'm just going to do what I want, and, you know, nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to act like, you know, I'm my own, I'm going to make my own rules. Yeah, and that's all going to work all fine until you're overrun by a group, a sergeant, and his squadron of guys. You're going to need a community. You're going to need to have connections with people. I haven't found my community yet because, as the shirt dictates, trust no one. I still haven't found people I trust. Well, I have, but they're scattered. That's all going to fall into place. Good time. You absolutely need militarism at the start. You need to have a very, and this is where I'm going to trigger some people, because people don't understand. People have so many negative connotations with words. The initial phases of SHTF, if you have a group, need to be very collectivist. I'm going to try not to use the word communist, but they need to be, you need to be making concessions to the greater good in order to ensure your survival. Communism is about survival. It's not about thriving. It's about how can we do the most with what we got. That's what the military is there for. The military is an institution of government which is there for the purpose of ensuring a nation's survival. The military is not there to help a nation thrive. Now, there's some caveats to that, because in the modern day, you can argue that there's the military industrial complex, of course, which seems to be where a lot of money is channeled from government into research projects. So a lot of the innovations, like the internet, are things which were created by the military. So in that sense, it does a service to society. But generally speaking, the military is a non-producing government leech. It's bureaucracy, right? It's another branch of government. It's necessary for survival, but it doesn't actually produce. The only way it produces, there's a few ways you could argue that it produces, and one of the ways that you could argue it produces is by way of interventionism around the world, which secures economic interests. The other is by research and development. The other is by way of, you know, teaching people values. So there are a few ways, but probably not to the extent of how much it takes off the budget. But like I say, it's necessary. It's kind of like a mandatory thing every country has to have if it wants to survive. But in order for a country to thrive, that takes a whole other set of skill sets. How many military dictatorships in the world are, and I'm not talking about in the abstract sense of, like China's a military dictatorship. It was at one point, but it is no longer. They've had to integrate free market practices in order for them to get to where they are. So what I'm saying is that what makes a country thrive is not the military. What makes it survive is military men. That's who ensures a nation's survival. Once survival is certain, which it never really is, but you know what I mean. Once it's 99% certain that we're going to survive, the military needs to step out of the way and let other people run the show who actually know how to create a socio-political, economic climate which is going to foster growth. Are you with me? There are some people with the free man on the land thing. It's putting the cart before the horse. Because you want your freedom before you have guaranteed your security. And in order to guarantee your security in a prolonged shit hit the fan without rule of law situation, you need to make concessions to a larger community, or else you're going to be overrun. It's that simple. I think I've pretty much covered everything I've wanted to cover. So I'm going to leave it to you now to enter this conversation, and I want to reiterate, I know you're probably already typed your comment and you're already ready to sink your teeth into me. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form, and this is not meant to diminish the importance of people with a military background in the preparedness community. The point of this video is because there's already a disproportion of people who do come from that background, and there's a disproportion of militarism within our community. The point of this video is to get people thinking about what it actually takes to reconstruct a society that is rooted in a soft skill approach. There's hard skills and there's soft skills. I did a couple videos back a couple years ago after the collapse installment, hard skills versus soft skills. Both are required. It's like the reed and the tree, the parable, or whatever, the legend of the reed and the tree, the reed of grass and the tree. When the storm comes, the tree is hard and stands firm, but because it's so hard, it breaks in the wind. The reed just blows over when the storm passes, pops back up. So who is stronger, the big giant strong tree or the reed? It's like a woman who is pregnant with somebody who is going to be like one of the best warriors someday. At that moment in time, it's this frail little delicate thing. But in order to build something that is strong, it first needs to be delicate, which is why there's so many delicate aspects to our modern world right now. And that's why countries who go that road of strict militarism, hardness, they never get as far. They never do what the West has done, which is embrace the soft skills, the scientists, the frail little nerdy guy who, wants to learn about photons and, scientific stuff. I mean, that's a soft skill. But I would give me one Eugene from The Walking Dead, like one mad scientist, and 5 grunts over 20 grunts. And give me some time, and that mad scientist is going to build some kind of weapon or crazy series of booby traps, or he's gonna think of some you know, some way to totally destroy these grunts. Just like one atomic bomb, you know, I mean, it's what built the atomic bomb was a delicate process of soft skills after soft skill upon soft skill, and it built something so hard, you know, over time, which could just obliterate 1 million men at once. So let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this YouTube channel is to support yourself by gearing up through CanadianPreparedness.com or BugoutRoll.ca. Premium quality gear at the best possible price using the incredibly secure and easy to use Shopify platform. We offer free shipping to the United States for orders over $200 USD and free shipping to Canada over $75. So support the channel by supporting yourself.